All right, what's up, everybody? Episode 5, Hoops with Noel. We got a pretty clean docket today. We got, obviously, headlined with Embiid versus Jokic. So they're the two best centers in the league right now. And we're going to debate who we think is better in a bunch of different scenarios and all that. But today we're going to start with the man who we think should come to our Chicago Bulls, ZO2, Lonzo Ball. So, Nolan, what are your thoughts on the Bulls trading for Lonzo Ball?
So, I'm all over it. I think the Bulls, we got Levine, who's a proven star this year, arguably superstar this year. And then we got Coby White, who's been playing pretty well, but a lot of times, especially watching the Bulls, as much as like me and you do, I notice Coby still has kind of like some IQ tendencies to grow up with, just getting in the league, kind of knowing how things move. He makes a lot of rookie mistakes, I'd say. And having someone like Lonzo to kind of show him, who's been in the league a couple of years and who's having a career year this year too, would be pretty awesome. So I would be all over it. I don't know how the logistics of the trading or whatnot, but what are your brief thoughts, intro thoughts to that?
So I know the Bulls have expressed interest in him, which is already promising. So it looks like they would like to get him. So my first thought with this is he would fit really well next to Levine. So right now, Coby White's kind of a scoring guard, and Levine's obviously a really good scoring guard. So having those two, there's a lot of scoring. And then we have Lowry at the 4, who all he can really do is score. Wendell, I don't really know what he does well. And then Patrick Williams. Patrick Williams is more of just like a defender, and I think he's growing. He's 19 years old, so like he has some potential, obviously. But I think having someone to run an actual offense or a better offense who would, be more of a playmaker and distributor for others than get his own shot would be Lonzo. And then another thing is, if Coby White were to not be the starter, he could be like a Lou Will 6-man type thing where he's just leading our bench unit. And so he could still get a ton of shots because I think he has a lot of potential in growing. But the fit with Levine and Lowry is what I don't like about him. Mm-hmm. But that would be negated a little more if he went to the bench and just became like our bench scorer in that role. Do you think that would be a good fit or a good idea, with Coby being more of like a Lou Williams where he's 6-man and he's just scoring with the bench unit?
Yeah, no, I think that would actually work really well because one thing I don't like with the Bulls right now is their secondary point guard. So I think Satoransky and RJ Diacono, they're not it. They're not it. Yeah. They simply they aren't it. They're not going to really be any sort of like playmakers, threats with the ball. No one's really too scared of what they're going to do with the ball. If you had someone like Coby White running the second team or the second team crew off the bench and just having his offensive threat, you could definitely do a lot more. Whereas a lot of guys at the bench, they don't really have what Coby brings to the table on offense. So I think it would work really well, honestly. It would be a super cool lineup.
And it's not like we would be sacrificing a ton of scoring either. So Lonzo's averaging 14 a game right now. But here's the thing that's crazy, right? His shooting has gotten a lot better. He's shooting over 70% from the free throw line after it was like 40 to start, or in the 40s and 50s his first couple of years, which is really surprising. But his three-point shooting 38% from the three-point line, and he's taken like 7 shots a game. So it's not like he's taking like 4 wide open.
He's pulling. This year he's pulling with confidence.
Yeah, he's looking like UCLA Lonzo, where he's taking deeper threes and he's confident in doing that. So there's that aspect. He's good at grabbing boards. He's pretty tall too, which is always a positive. And he's not bad on defense. I don't think Coby's the best defender. I think you mentioned like, younger person mistakes, maybe not as much effort, but Lonzo's a good defender. And so that would just help our team in general, as our defense is really not that good, interior or like on the perimeter or on the inside. So he would help with that sense, bring more size. And he drops some dimes, like to Zion, half-court passes. He did all that at UCLA too, and I think that's really translatable to any team he goes on. So I like this fit. And then what do you think we would have to trade to get him?
Yeah, so I mean that's the kicker, right? Is what we give up to get Lonzo. But we do have a deep team. So I mean, when you look at the Pels and what they could maybe need, maybe a secondary big man to go on the bench off of Zion. So maybe a Thad Young, who's been having a pretty good year, because I think the Pels start Melly or Nicolo Melly or whatever his name is, not that good of a player. He's kind of an average guy. So Thad Young maybe can provide some depth in the big men. And then with our guards, I would say just throw guards at him. If it's not Kobe White or Zach LaVine, just throw whoever.
Yeah.
They would take it. Then I would be down. But who would be some trade proposals you might scheme up or think would be good?
Okay, so for Thaddeus Young, aka Thaddeus Johnson, as Stacy calls him, great name. I know the Bulls have said they don't want to trade him, and I honestly am happy with keeping him, mainly for the fact that he is older. I don't think his trade value would be that much due to that, but he's been playing really well, honestly, just in our system, and I guess as a mentor role in a sense, not that he's like been to a bunch of championships, but like help mentor young guys and just be there to fill in the system. But I think if we traded a first round pick with like top 10 protections or top 8 or something, so that way, like if say we're in the lottery at like pick 14 or pick 13 and it jumps all the way to like 5 or 6, like we're not getting screwed out of that. So my thought was we could trade like a top 8 protected first or top 10, either or, and then maybe a second rounder. And then for their needs, like, they seem to be rebuilding. So I feel like we don't really have that many young guys. Like maybe if they wanted Wendell or a backup guard or something.
I'd give up Wendell. I would do that.
Yeah, like that wouldn't be bad. Like we would have Felicio, but I mean, it's not like our center play's been all that great regardless. So I think at first, and then there was one other thing scheme-wise I wanted to mention. So if you remember last year on the Thunder, they would close a lot of games with their 3-guard lineup, and they would have Chris Paul, Shai Gilgeous, and Dennis Schroeder. Now, that combo was probably or would be better than our combo of 3 guards, which would be LaVine, Kobe White, and Lonzo. But I feel like that lineup could get implemented a little bit as Billy Donovan has run that in the past. And I think it could work. Definitely like the 3-point shooting's there. They could spread teams out, take people off the dribble. Do you think that could be something, an added layer to the offense and scheme that we have if we brought Lonzo over?
Mm-hmm. I would like to see how it happen. I do have some worries just because of our big men having to pick up the slack maybe on defense for running the 3 guards. But I mean, Lonzo's a good defender. LaVine is honestly a pretty good defender.
He's
too.
all right. Yeah, like he's not a lot.
It would just be as Kobe improves. But I mean, on offense, it would really just open up the floor, especially if we had like someone like Markkanen maybe on that line too. It would be interesting. So I would be curious how it would go on defense would be my concern. Yeah. I'm excited to watch it in action on offense. But what you think it would be successful? How do you think it would go?
Yeah, I think it would be nice. Well, the thing is like Billy Turner's ran that before. And I would say Gilgeous, Paul, and Schroeder is probably better than our 3, but Lonzo running like a Chris Paul more playmaking role. I think LaVine's better than Gilgeous, and I guess Schroeder's better than Kobe White, but I think they could run a similar type thing or type scheme with that.
One would probably have a mismatch too. They definitely couldn't have 3.
Exactly, yeah. Like guarding all 3 of them wouldn't be easy. And yeah, Lonzo does bring some size to the guard package too, and he is really good on defense. So he could make up for some of the deficiencies. And maybe they did it like a small ball lineup where they had Patrick Williams at the 4 and then just like spread the floor completely and then just had people, get a guard onto a big and take him off the dribble or something. So that was another wrinkle that I thought of. And then one more thing. So I believe Lonzo is going to be a restricted free agent this summer. So we would have to pay him. I wouldn't be opposed to that, honestly. I think just because of the fit and all that, but maybe we don't try to trade for him and just go for him in the offseason is the other thing. So there's going to be multiple chances to get Lonzo if the Bulls, the new front office, think that's the move. I think we both agree that it would be an awesome fit. Would definitely bring some
that just the Bulls front office is taking more initiative with getting 2-way players for the Pat Williams draft. So I think it would be up their alley with the new front office.
Exactly. And then I guess we could transition to another point guard, and that's going to be Kyle Lowry from the Raptors going to the Los Angeles Clippers, who have been really good this year. They are missing a little something at point guard. Pat Bev and Reggie Jackson, not the best point guard duo in the league. Not even close.
Not even close. Definitely bottom tier.
But what do you think about the Clippers trading for Lowry? So he has said he doesn't know, or his future in with the Raptors is uncertain, although he'd like to retire there. So maybe that is like 1 year in the future. He is 33. So he is a little older, but he's still really efficient. I feel like he hasn't really lost a step, or maybe a half step at most. What are your thoughts about this, and would it make the Clippers into the top notch of teams?
Mm-hmm. So I think I would be a great fit. I really do think it would be a great fit. Although I didn't realize Lowry has a pretty pricey contract right now, so I think it would be a little bit difficult to negotiate that. And also I was reading up on just if the trade would happen, and it seemed like the Clippers would probably have to give up some people, like guys like Serge, Lou Will, or Marcus Morris. And as good as Lowry is, I don't know. Depending on how many, like those bigs, I look at if they had to give up Serge Ibaka or even Morris, I don't know if it'd be worth it. But I am with you that their point guard duo trio, if you throw Lou Will in there, not ideal. But what are your thoughts on Lowry to the Clips? What do you think?
Yeah, so I think right now them and the Lakers are probably easily the top two teams, and I could see either making out of the West. If they got Lowry, I think they could really put up a good fight against the Nets. I think they would beat the Lakers. I really do. So what this team's missing is like another playmaker at the guard. I think Ibaka's filled the center role really good from last year, but they're still missing like someone to run an actual offense. All they do is ISO with Kawhi or PG, and I think we've seen in the playoffs, like if one of them gets cold, it starts becoming a huge problem. So Lowry would fix that. He's been in a ton of playoff games, so he has a lot of experience.
He honestly has one of the most highest IQs of any player.
He really is. Smart. So yeah, I think it makes a ton of sense for them to do it. Now the issue is the trade, right? What they would have to give up. They don't really have any picks. They traded a king's ransom to get Paul George, and so they don't really have picks. But here's what I thought of. So they do have a lot of seconds. Now, if they did like 2 or 3 seconds and then one of Lou Will or Pat Bev, maybe like Terrence Mann or another young guy that the Raptors would want, because I think Kyle Lowry's worth more than that. Honestly, I really do. But with age and then him like maybe wanting to leave and go to a more contender type team, that would be like the best chance is the Clippers. And I think he does make just so much sense for this roster. I think it would put them over the top. Do you think they would be better than the Lakers and the best team in the West if they did this?
So I guess to answer that question, should we say hypothetically they get rid of Lou Will and some second rounders? Is that would be the trade?
They get rid of Lou Will, Pat Bev, Patrick Patterson, and then some second rounders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that would put him over the top. I think just that on top of another factor is just the vengeance factor. I mean, the revenge factor. The Clips were embarrassed in the playoffs last year. They got the grudge or dirt on their shoulder or whatever you want to call it. They're mad. They're trying to get there, and I think Kyle Lowry would definitely give them the added boost to at least for them versus the Lakers, the added edge over them. Is that how you see it too, though?
Yeah. So. Last year they were hyped as like, oh, this team's going to the finals. This is a super team. They're amazing. And we saw them. They had locker room problems, right? People didn't really take Paul George that seriously. He didn't play the best in the postseason, but that was with like Montrezl Harrell, JaMychal Green, Paul George. There's some Pat Bev stuff too, but we haven't really heard a peep about any of that. They seem to have they're not really arrogant this year. You don't hear a ton of news about them. Like being like that, I think they're flying under the radar heavy right now. They're not being talked about like the Nets or the Lakers are, or the 76ers for that matter. When I honestly think right now they can put up a dogfight against the Lakers and probably beat them. But with Lowry added into the mix, him being their third piece, they got Batum and Ibaka this offseason. Luke Kennard, Marcus Morris is back. They have another year of chemistry. I think they have the roster to really take it far, at least Western Conference Finals. If they didn't get there, I think it'd be pretty disappointing.
And as like common as the playoff P narrative has been, I do think he is due to have a good playoff performance.
Yeah.
As much as he's had his woes, like he really is due because he's a great player. He's a great player.
And he's looked really good this season. Now it is regular season, and that doesn't always mean much in the realm of the NBA when there's 82 games, but it's got to be at least promising, and hopefully the continuity of having the same roster or same team and a better coach in Tyronn Lue than I think Doc Rivers. I really like him this year.
Yeah, I would agree.
Awesome. And now the main topic that we wanted to cover, this is a good one, honestly. So these are
very even.
Yeah, so these are the top two centers in the league. Both are in the MVP convo. I think Embiid was winning it until this most recent injury where he hyperextended his, I think, left knee. Thank goodness it wasn't any structural damage or anything. He'll be able to play, obviously, in 2 to 3 weeks. But in any sense or just in general, do you think, or who do you think is better, Joel Embiid or Nikola Jokic?
Interesting. All right, so before I get into who I think, I got a hot take that I'm gonna hit you with off the bat.
Okay.
I was doing some looking up on the stat sheets of old centers, just like the best centers, because these guys really have been playing out of their mind good this year. Mm-hmm. So I was comparing them to center greats: Shaquille O'Neal, Hakeem Olajuwon, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And my hot take is I think that Embiid and Jokic are the two best centers of all time. You heard it here first. It's a hot one. You can look it up. But I think with the modern NBA, like comparing with the modern NBA, with the three ball as a part of the game, because it wasn't part of the game back then. It's a very hot take, and I'm very curious if you have some comments. Definitely let me know in the comments. But when comparing just those two, Jokic or Embiid, I look at the one, I'll start with the biggest differential factor because they really are even in a lot of senses, and that goes with playmaking passing, which I think Jokic is just one of the most special players to ever come by the league in that sense, with how tall he is, with how big he is, and how well he can pass. It is insane. So I'm going to give him the edge in that category off the bat, but do you have any other insight categories? What are your thoughts, huh?
Okay, so the way I look at this is it depends on your team. And in 85 to 90% of the situations, give me Jokic. Mainly just because I think his playmaking is more valuable than Embiid's defensive edge. And so if I had a team that was it was all role players, and I had to pick one, and the goal was how far can I get in the playoffs? I'd say give me Jokic. I think I'll get farther with him than Embiid. But if I had a loaded team, they had a bunch of stars like say Levine. There was Levine. There was Kyrie Irving. There was a bunch of other stars. In that sense, I would rather have Embiid because although I'm sacrificing the playmaking, I have these other guys that can do that. And he's more of a presence down low on the defensive end, and he is a complete anchor. And he is, I think, a notch or two above Jokic in that sense, in that you're not scoring on him easily in the post. He's 7'2", quick.
You're not making up room on him in the post. You try to back him down, you're going nowhere. You're going nowhere.
And the Sixers this year have been one of the best, I think a top 3 or 5 defensive team. And they do have other good defenders like Thibault and Simmons, but a large part of that is because their inside defense is insane. And then here's the thing, too, with Jokic is his playoff performances have been out of this world. Do you think that has any factor on who's better?
I definitely do. You just said with any NBA debates, you got to talk about playoff performances, clutch performances. Jokic has proven just last year alone that he's one of the most clutch players in the league. And even, too, if you watch Nuggets games, the amount of Nuggets games I've seen come down to the last possession where Jokic just gets in the paint with a little, teardrop floater or even, a fadeaway, he really is one of the most clutch players in the NBA. And not to say Embiid's made some big shots, too, but when I think about Embiid and clutch, for some reason, the only thing I can think of is Kawhi hitting that 3 in his face. It was that way around, I think, for a reason. So I don't know. It's a tough scene, but that's what I would say in terms of clutchness. What are your thoughts, though, on clutchness? How does that play into the debate?
Yeah, I think it's huge because at the end of the games, one of these guys is going to have the ball in their hand. And would you rather have Jokic running a 2-man game with Murray or whoever? Because that's all the Nuggets do. And there's 5 minutes left. It basically just goes into pick and roll with Jokic and usually Murray, but they're just running pick and roll nonstop, and then it could turn into a pick and pop. And Jokic gets the ball in the post. He can either pass it because he's really, really good at passing. His 3 is really good too. His fadeaway, he has insane touch from all around the court. I think better touch than Embiid, although Embiid's a pretty decent shooter. Mm-hmm. And then, yeah, around the rim, his finishing is really, really good too. So I like that. And that's the thing with Embiid too is in times of playoffs, your best ability is how often you can get on the floor. Embiid really struggles at playing a lot of games. He'll have injuries or be out of shape due to those injuries. I think it was the Nets in 2019 where he missed a game or two just because of that. I mean, they still won, but if his team was not as good as they were or overpowering the Nets, like that's a huge issue. Mm-hmm. But Jokic is always there. He always brings his A game. 7-game series doesn't matter to him. He's going to play. Played 19 games last year, 2 7-game series. Came down from 2 3-1 deficits. Absolutely insane.
I would also say too with Jokic is in the playoffs too is he has another gear. He has like a third gear where in some of those big games he just came out like on a tear, going right into whoever's defender was, right to the hoop, and he would stay on that in the entire game. Whereas Embiid definitely can do that himself too. But in terms of it's almost like a switch where I see a little bit more in Jokic compared to Embiid. And then another point that I was going to get to is when you look at how dominant these players are, a lot of times teams will throw the doubles in. And that's where I think a big factor where Jokic's passing comes into play, where he's so good at finding the open man off those. And Embiid is still pretty good at doing that, but not nearly to the extent, which is a big factor when you have a guy in the post who gets doubled a lot.
Mm-hmm. And Embiid in a one-on-one, I think he could be better. Just like if he's in the post and he has a one-on-one, like there's very few people that can guard his footwork and just his overall size. And in that sense, I think he probably is better than Jokic. Like Jokic is amazing around the rim, insane touch, but Embiid is just such a physical force that like staying in front of him is not easy. He'll get you in foul trouble and all that. So yeah, I think Jokic is better, but I think in certain situations where you do have a better roster and you can sacrifice a little playmaking for that defense, Embiid would be more suited. I was going to ask you too, do you think in a one-on-one situation, who do you think would win?
Yeah, so I was thinking about that, and I would give Embiid the upper hand. I think if it gets more physical, then he could just with his body and his size could make up a little bit more leverage and would be more of an anchor on defense. But I really think it'd go either way. I mean, it depends, obviously, if they're actually calling fouls, if it's street ball we're talking about, how the jumpers are going. Because I would say Embiid seems as good as Jokic is off the posts. He has like a little bit more variability with his moves, where I think Embiid has such a good grip on his like go-to moves that for a 1v1, I would probably pick Embiid. I think he'd be better suited for that.
Interesting. So I guess the question would be for me is like, I think Embiid's going to get his on Jokic, right? Like just due to size and stuff, but Jokic versus Embiid on Jokic on offense and Embiid on defense would be really interesting to watch. So I think Jokic is better just like movements in general with his offense. Embiid's obviously huge and has great footwork, but could he come out and guard him really well, like on the perimeter? Because Jokic can splash threes. That is not an issue for him. He could hit mid-range too. But I think the issue with Jokic is he benefits more from a team game just due to his passing, where as Embiid, he could just take the ball every time and go get you a bucket. Like that's not an issue. I still think I'd go Jokic though, just because of his shooting. Like three's more than two, and he can hit from deep when he gets hot, and he'll heat up. But
yeah, and then I would also just add on that if you're talking 1v1, I think just the other end of the spectrum will be in the pick and roll, and I think that's, as you said, part of the game where Jokic is just a little bit better. I think his game fits that style of play a little bit more.
Oh, yeah. I mean, watch any Nuggets game that's close in the last 5 minutes, and you'll see that's all they do. They just run pick and roll with him and Murray. Doesn't matter how many times in the possession, they'll just keep running it and spamming that. But it does work, and I'm interested to see, though, if Embiid didn't have Ben Simmons and there was more spacing, which there is more spacing this year, but it still is an issue with Simmons not really playing outside of or being able to score outside of 15 feet. Do you think that could maybe make Embiid look better if he had more room to operate with better shooters?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, actually. I think it definitely would make Embiid look a little bit better because that's one of the things I was bringing up earlier is when you bring the double, obviously he's going to pass it out, but if you got Simmons in the three, it's not really like, oh, is he going to bang a three? No, he's not going to bang a three. It's Ben Simmons. So I think that definitely hinders Embiid. And then I think it's just such a curious dynamic though, because it's just literally transition versus more standstill. But I definitely think it decreases upon Embiid's true value on the court. What do you think though in that dynamic?
In the sense of,
does it hinder Embiid's like how good like you think he would look better without?
Yeah, say he had like Kyle Lowry as his point guard. I think that would make him look a lot better in having more spacing. Simmons is a good passer, but there comes a time in the playoffs where him not being able to go outside of the paint and do much of anything is really a hindrance when you're in the half court. And I am excited to see Embiid because I think a lot of narratives could change if Embiid's healthy, the 76ers make a deep run like we're projecting them to do. And maybe against the Nets, they rattle off 2 or 3 games. And at that point, you could really make a stronger argument for Embiid in that he almost beat this loaded team with 3 studs and a ton of just other good players.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think honestly, this debate is probably going to be ended in the playoffs. It's going to be we know Jokic has been clutch, but I mean, following up the act he did last year is a very tall task. So I think there is definitely room for Embiid to pull off a little run with the Sixers and prove kind of how he deserves to be on that same playing field, maybe even better.
Yeah, and then the MVP conversation too. I think Embiid, Jokic, and LeBron are the top 3 right now. With Embiid fell a little bit due to the injury, but if he's back and plays more than 70 games, he hasn't ever played more than 70 games, which is crazy, just due to injuries. That's what happens when you're 7'2" and 280.
It's true, and you're a physical man.
But that'll happen. And then, do you have any more thoughts on this before we wrap it up, Noel?
No. I think final decision. If it wasn't obvious, I would say Jokic is better. But I think Embiid has the chance to prove himself in the playoffs.
Yeah, he definitely does. I'll agree with that. And then that'll wrap it up for this episode, guys. Drop some comments on what you think of the Jokic.
Yeah, definitely let me know, too, if you think they're better centers. Roast me in the comments. Full on, if you want to. I embrace it.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. I don't know. Hakeem, David Robinson, Patrick Ewing. We don't know about Wilt because the man played in the 50s, but yeah. That'll wrap it up. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time.